One of our loyal commenters, Scott Brown, asked me if I'd comment on the election of Dave Parker to the Hall of Fame many years after his career has ended. Parker had a career that could have been better than it was numbers-wise because of some things he messed around with in the middle of the prime of his career. But during that guy's prime, he was the best player in baseball for a couple of years. Right fielder for the Pirates during his prime, went on to play with the Reds, the A's, and the Brewers. He was there with them for a little while. Certainly put up the numbers, and I was happy to see that he made it to the Hall of Fame because he was a big part of the '79 World Series Pirates.
I have a close friend, Mark, who might be listening. I know he listens to WRNR on a regular basis, but
as should everybody.
Diehard Pirate guy, and in particular, diehard Dave Parker guy. Had the jersey and everything, and he has complained for years that Dave Parker should be in the Hall of Fame. So when I saw that, I ran a quick photo of the story and sent it to him, and he said, about time.
Yeah, I agree with that. And my only message now for the owner, Bob Nutting, sell the team, Bob. Sell the team. Our guest in this segment is Eric Tarr. He is the Senate Finance Chair, was a candidate for Senate President of the three who ran, Tom Takubo, Randy Smith, and then Eric Tarr being the third. Eric, good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Rob. Thanks for having me on.
Great to have you with us, sir. So let's get to the Senate President stuff first. In the Metro News article, it said that all three of you gentlemen were pretty good friends, and the two of you who were eliminated were the first to congratulate Randy Smith once he won. All genuine, Eric?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, we all are good friends. And you know, all of us just have a little bit of a different vision for the Senate, and so there's distinct differences, I think, in our visions, but all three of us have a great respect for one another, and we'll love each other like brothers, and I don't see anything that ever change that, whether it be a Senate President race or anything else. What
made you decide to run for Senate President, Eric, and then ultimately, why do you feel your bid was unsuccessful?
You know, politically, the caucus and it's the Republican Party in general, I think you see it nationwide, has kind of, as our majorities have climbed, you see these political subdivisions of political factions that happen within our bodies. And as you get more and more numbers in a body, in the Senate, we're going to have 32 out of 34 senators in there that are Republican. So you start running out of people to fight, and you start fighting amongst yourselves, and it's kind of the natural history of things in these supermajorities. And so you'll get the factions where you kind of have like what you might call an ultra-right, and you have a faction that's more might be left on the social issues, but they're still right on the economic issues. And then you've got the ones in the middle that kind of marry all of that. One of the oddest positions I found myself in, because I was, and still find myself as far as politically, my voting record, one of the most conservative you'll find in the Senate. However, I found myself where personally I had supporters that were out of both factions of the left and what I would say is probably you might call the ultra-right. And my concern was that we would become a dysfunctional body within the Senate and not be as quick and as aggressive and as agile as we have been for growing West Virginia if we ended up in some sort of civil war within that Senate. So that was my reason for running, is that I thought that I will do what I can to try to keep the factions from just fighting each other and still continue to work together. And my hope is we still continue to work together. You know, it's Randy. One of the things about Randy is that he's very well liked. He's loved in the Senate. So this is really the first time we'll get to see him in what is a strong leadership role. So it's still yet to be seen, but the Senate has been really the think tank. It's been the brain trust for the state legislature and for the state in general since 2015 for setting the agendas for what will move forward in West Virginia. And West Virginians have benefited for that and will continue to benefit from that. So,
Senate Finance Chairman Eric Tarr, our guest here on the program. Here's the issue with the Republican Party that I see, Eric, and you mentioned you run out of people to fight, so you start fighting among yourselves. And that is that the Republicans have run out of Democrats to assign boogeyman titles to. Too liberal, too whatever, too far left. And because they've run out of Democrats to do that to, they've started doing it to their fellow Republicans. And the primary that we had here in May was among the more vicious elections that I've seen here in the Eastern Panhandle. We began to introduce national strategies in the local races, whereas that never really happened en masse before like it recently did. And it was ugly. I mean, some of the campaign ads were just off the charts. And it didn't matter how conservative everyone thought you were a couple of years ago. Now you were a liberal. You were a rhino. And I'm not sure how you were or how you were liberal, but you were, because that was the label in the ad. You weren't far right enough. Is that a problem that West Virginia's Republicans are going to face going forward, or do you think this was a one-time fad?
No, I don't think it's a one-time fad. I think that we have to figure out how to fix that in the Republican Party, or we're going to find ourselves in the minority again. In my time in politics, that election, and I wasn't on the ballot. I'm not on the ballot until another 2 years. But that election was the most vicious election as far as blood sport side of it goes I have seen in my time in politics. And you're right. And I think what happened is, Republicans, historically when we've been fighting Democrats, and you're comparing, you're trying to make the distinction between the Republican and the Democrat ideology. Republicans run on you're pro-life, you're pro-jobs, and you're pro-gun. I mean, that's a West Virginia thing. You come out, your Second Amendment, you're pro-life, and you're pro-jobs. Well, what if everybody's pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and pro-jobs? Where do you go from there? I'm more pro-jobs than you? That's a hard campaign message. And so we have the infrastructure for the Republican campaigns have not been built on primaries. The infrastructure for Republican campaigns have been built on fighting Democrats, fighting the Democrat ideology. And we ended up in this primary with that infrastructure. And so we go aggressively at the Democrats. We turned around and used that infrastructure, and I'm saying I'm talking about the Republican Party across this country. We went into that infrastructure and then demonized our fellow Republicans. And so you had to go something that significantly distinguished you from the next person. And in West Virginia, one of the problems that came up is that the laws that we have in elections really aren't terribly effective for being enforced, because if you win, you can go out and right near the end of the election, you can be as aggressive as you want. And if you win the election, there's really no repercussion. So we're going to have to figure out something, I think, in our election processes so that when we're communicating who we are to the public, and that a candidate can say, this is who I am, that the person who is receiving that message has some sort of accuracy on it. Because right now, I think that the public should be disenfranchised. They don't know what to believe because of how vicious this messaging are. Because I know a lot of these people. I know who they are. I know what they are. And I know these campaign messages were the furthest thing from the truth. So yeah, I mean, it's something we're going to have to fix if we're going to want to stay in the majority.
Mr. Gilstrap.
I was really concerned by all of that. There's 1,000 ways to go on this. I think that one of the things that happened was certainly during the primaries, it looked like Trump was in real trouble, and the left agenda was going so far left at the national level that the candidates started running against imagined issues that might occur in West Virginia. And anybody who hadn't taken a position, a prophylactic position against these imagined issues, was somehow a woke Democrat. And it just kind of spun out of control. But I want to ask the question, I'm not to you necessarily, because I don't want to put you on the spot, but isn't there a responsibility for colleagues of politicians, perhaps other politicians, to call out those who are pretending to be things that they are not?
Yeah, that's a tough question. And coming out of the Senate president's race, I can speak to that really specifically. Anything, usually when we're voting on something or debating something at a political level as a legislator, the things are broadly affected. We're affecting the people who elected us, and we're affecting the people across the state of West Virginia that may not be in our districts. And so we have debates as people who are representing other people. In elections, like in redistricting, when you're debating amongst yourselves, Senate president's races, when you're debating amongst yourselves, and in these elections where you're competing to keep a seat or to gain a seat amongst ourselves, it's very distinctive in that you're fighting for you individually. This is your skin. So you're having now, instead of compete against an impact that everybody has skin in the game with. So when we're debating those issues that are broadly effective, it's not just affecting me; it's also affecting you, and it's affecting everybody else. These elections, like redistricting, or issues like redistricting, campaigns, and internal races, they are very, very personal, specific to that individual legislator, and it changes the nature of the beast. In my two worst times being in this legislature were redistricting, and redistricting was worse than this president's race, but the president's race is a close second. And it's that where it becomes very individual focused, and you're in a boxing match and it's a fight, and you can't pull punches on the other guys if you want to win, and that's where we sit right now. And I don't know if you can affect that, but I do think we can set better rules around our election processes so that there is a real penalty for when you foul. Right now, there's no penalty for when you foul.
Would that be a caucus rule, or would that be like a law?
I think in the elections process with primaries, it would be a law, or elections in general. I think there's laws that we need to put in place that have real teeth around electioneering, election messaging that sets a proof for truth, I think, and I think also for competition. And one of the things that we really saw in this last election is that super PACs can completely drown out the message of an individual candidate. And the reason is the power of the funds that can go into a super PAC versus the power of funds that can go into an individual candidate. So you'll have super PACs who are loaded with millions of dollars, going after a state senator who may have $150,000, $200,000. And there's no capacity for that individual to raise the kind of money the super PAC did. So funding, I think, is an issue that we're going to have to address to put parity across that. I think that you're also going to have that if somebody is campaigning on a message of falsehood and that we find that out and it's verified, maybe it's proven in a court. Once you get past an election, you can be taken right back out of your seat for having used those campaign tactics. You're going to have to think about telling the truth. I think those discussions are worth having.
Matt Miller. And you can ask about anything, by the way. You can get off this track if you want.
No, it's kind of intriguing because, I'm thinking the lengthy process that some of that stuff could take. You would be in your seat and probably, maybe even be into a re-election bid before some of those types of cases might go through a system as to whether you were speaking the truth about a candidate or not, because it's so easy, especially in this day and age, to pull clips out, short snippets from someone and take it completely out of context and make it appear they've said something that they haven't. I'm thinking from a legal standpoint, how do you kind of prove, John Gilstrap, you knew that what you were saying about me was not true, but how do I now prove that?
No, great question. And that's why I'm saying those are the debates we have to have around it. And I think that's probably why we sit with the election laws where they are now. But I think just because that's a difficult challenge doesn't mean it's a challenge we shouldn't try to take on. there's room for improvement. Does it get all the way to that? I don't know. But I think it's definitely, we need to have those discussions, or we're going to continue to devolve into the person who shows up at the ballot box having no idea what they're actually voting for.
I think what's at stake here is actually bigger than West Virginia politics. I think it goes to American politics. Actually, not to be draconian here, but the future of the republic, which is built on the belief in the republic. And the more and more cynical that the electorate gets, the less they trust government, the closer we get to anarchy. And that's just the opportunity for all kinds of nastiness come in. So yeah, the more we can move toward truth in politics, that's that's a really good thing.
Eric, let me ask you. Oh, I'm sorry. Please comment.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, in regards to your current position of Senate Finance Chairman, do you have any indication as to whether or not you will be able to continue that, or any indication as to whether or not you'd like to do something else?
You know, I'm likely would not stay in the finance chair position. And the reason is I think that where the caucus is going is that they're going in a direction that I can't say that it's completely where I agree with. On the approach that I think is going to be taken at an economic level, and I think within our election process for Senate President, they made that clear. So I think that if the new Senate President coming in really needs somebody who's going to believe more in that vision, he's probably going to need somebody that there's a much very trusted role between the finance chairman and the Senate President's role. And that's one of the things that I've got to enjoy in the finance chair position is that there's a confidence level in the Senate President that I served under, who also was a finance chairman, that when you're making really hard decisions and you're making very politically open, politically tough decisions, that I'm not going to lose skin because of the Senate President either not understanding or not believing in what we're doing. And so it's hard to be as effective, I think, as I have been without that same confidence level of a president and me, or me and the president. So, but that's where I sit right now. I think there's still a lot of time right now. I don't think Senator Smith has really went out and put out his Senate leadership team and what that all looks like right now. But that's kind of where my head is.
You kind of opened a door there for me, so I'm going to walk through here, Eric, in regards to the direction that you think that the caucus is going to go in regards to economics or the state economic development. What are you driving at there, other than a philosophical difference between the Senate President and a Senate Finance Chair about some procedural things?
It takes back, and this is, that's one of the things is, I'm not a BSer. So the reason I ran for Senate and the reason I serve in the Senate is that I believe the potential for a quality of life for any individual West Virginian is incredible, and we've never given the tools for somebody who's born in abject poverty to see that they can get out of it. And in order for that to happen, you have to have an individual who can at least see hope. And so my service has been drive this economy as hard as you can possibly drive it. It's been the way since I came up as an advisor in 2015. How do we get it to where the business community globally looks at West Virginia and says that is where we got to be? 1,000%, we've got to be there. Number one thing to do. And if you grow up in West Virginia, we need our youth with the mindset that West Virginia is the best place in the world to be. Why would I try to grow my family outside of West Virginia? Well, in order to get that kind of hope, you have to have jobs. And if you do not have a strong, vibrant, competitive job creation environment, then you continue to put somebody dependent on government. And when you have somebody dependent on government, then you're dependent on a big government and social services that drive completely the opposite social politics that any Republican's about. And I think what we're seeing on the shift is that while I agree with and probably would vote for any of the social policy that you see that would come from the new leadership, because that's where I'm at. But it's not why I ran. Why I ran was to grow this economy. And I think that the weight of those two things is shifting, that's placed on them. And I'm going to continue to serve. Don't get me wrong. There is absolutely no way I'm resigning this seat. It is an honor of my life to be here. But I'm not sure that from that role now, that's the spot that I can affect that reason I ran.
So I'm getting social warrior versus economic driver. Is that a good way to?
Yeah.
Are you concerned that if too many social warrior policies are passed and adopted as law, it will affect the economic development of the state because of a neglect of developing the state economically, or because those policies may frighten some companies from coming to West Virginia?
I don't think the policies frighten people from coming to West Virginia. So I want to address, I've been asked that a lot of times when I'm down here in Charleston radio locally. And I would love to see West Virginia be the safe haven, sanctuary state for living a conservative life, and we're living according to those conservative values, and which is faith, family, freedom, strong families, hope, and be a conservative sanctuary haven for businesses that also believe in that. And there's a lot of them out there, and really big businesses that do, and they fight a global social sentiment that they have to go out and virtue signal, even though they may not have those same values that virtue signaling represents. But they got to do it for stock price. I mean, it's just where it is. And so if you go out and fight a company on their virtue signaling that really could come in and completely improve the lives of people in West Virginia, so that you get them off of government handouts and get them to where they understand what the value of having a job, the value of having a career, the value of being able to support a family is. You have to be able to understand the inner workings of those two different things, and how a publicly traded company has to dance along that line.
Hey, on that note, I got to wrap it up with you because I'm up against a hard break here that I have to get out by a certain time. But no, it's appreciated the interview. This is a lot of frank stuff, Senator Tarr. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys have a great day.
You too.
You too.
Okay, bye-bye.
Senator Eric Tarr.